Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm starting the journey of turning myself into a 2D VTuber. Recently, I started living in an apartment with my husband, and it is much quieter here than living at home with my family. Because I now live in a more quiet space, I've started considering the option of live streaming. It's always been something I've wanted to try, but my space used to be too noisy for it. But since I now live in a more quiet space, it's now a possibility. And I wanted to start creating stuff that I will need for it. One of the things I want for streaming is a VTuber model, because I don't really want to do a face cam. I did do a video on turning myself into a 3D VTuber, and that model was nice. But I feel like I would prefer a 2D model that is drawn in my art style. If you don't know what 2D VTuber is or how it works, basically you draw a character with all of the different parts separated, and then you bring it into a program called Live 2D, where you are able to move the parts around and make it look like the character is moving. I do want to let you know that I will not be finishing the model in this video. This is going to be a series broken up over multiple videos I will post as I make progress on the model. Creating a 2D VTuber can take a really long time, especially if you are a total noob like me, who has no experience making 2D VTubers or Live 2D. But I thought you might like coming along for this learning process. Before we jump into this process, I want to thank Wondershare Demo Creator for sponsoring this video. With Wondershare Demo Creator, you can record and edit with ease. It is a great fit for all different kinds of video creation, from business, education, gaming, live streaming, and so much more. It has all kinds of super handy features like a built-in screen recorder, webcam recorder, and voice recorder. When you're recording, you can use super handy features like screen drawing, and even built-in VTuber models. You know, so you don't have to make one yourself. You can also easily create videos for YouTube Shorts, Reels, and TikTok by using built-in record settings. Once you're done recording, you can instantly start editing what you filmed in a sleek and easy-to-learn editor. Of course, Wondershare Demo Creator's editor has all the features that you would expect, like trimming and cutting video footage, changing video speed, audio editing, and so much more. But it also has unique features like cursor effects. With cursor effects, you can make your work stand out with highlight, spotlight, magnify, click rings, and sound effects. It also has a ton of video effects that can really bring your videos to the next level. I am an actual Wondershare customer, and I love using it to record footage for my videos. I actually used it a ton to create this video you're watching now. Plus, Wondershare Demo Creator is free to try. So check out the link in the description and try it out for yourself. Thank you so much again to Wondershare Demo Creator for sponsoring this video. Now let's jump into turning myself into a 2D VTuber. Of course, the first step of all of this is drawing my model. I'm going to base my model off the chibi you see me use in my videos, except instead of being turned in 3/4 view, this chibi is going to be in front view. I imported a pic of my chibi to use as a guide for the proportions, and I tried my best to do something similar but just in a different view. And this went a lot smoother than I was anticipating. I was expecting I would have to finagle with the proportions a decent amount to get something I was happy with or that matched the original chibi. But it all matched up pretty decently on the first attempt, so yay! I know a lot of times for VTubers, people make a character or persona, and sometimes they try to act like their character while also mixing in their own personality. But for my model, I'm just basing it on myself. I'm not like creating a character or anything. Like I said, I am making this model because I don't want to have to show my face on stream, but I still want something on screen that is emoting and connecting with the audience in some way. The reason why I don't really want to use my face in streams is mostly because it often sounds like a hassle to make myself look presentable. Also, I'm kind of camera shy, and you also have to have a good lighting setup, and I don't really have much room for that in my office. So yeah, a simple chibi model that represents me seems like a nice option. Plus, this is just something I've always really wanted to try. I've always really wanted to try out Live 2D. Right here, I'm coloring in the different sections of the hair to help me get a better idea of how I want to break it up for the model. Like I kind of mentioned, when making VTuber models, you need to break up the picture into different parts so that you can move them around and give the illusion of motion. Sometimes people will draw a character and then break it up into pieces by selecting parts and cutting them out onto their own layers, while other people will draw the different parts as they go. I chose this method since it felt easier to me. After I draw all the different parts, I will do a walkthrough of how I broke them all up. As you can see, I draw the full shape of the head. If this was just a normal illustration, I wouldn't normally do this, but because I'm going to be moving parts around like my strands of hair, I need to make sure that all the parts of the head under the hair are drawn so that when the hair moves, we don't have weird empty spots. Or like when the eyes blink, there aren't going to be empty spaces from where the eyes were open. For the eyes, I had to use a lot of different layers, since each part needs its own layer. Like the upper eyelashes need to be separate from the lower lashes, and the left eye and the right eye elements all need to be separated, and all the different eye shinies. And yeah, it's a lot of parts. Another important part of this process is keeping all of your layers organized. It'll make the rigging process much easier later. I kept things pretty organized as I was working, but I worried more about naming my layers and making sure all the layers were together how I wanted after I finished all the drawing. When I draw, my keyboard is behind my drawing tablet and it's hard to reach, so it was easier for me to name all the layers after finishing the drawing. I did decide to add some extra shinies to the rig. The eyes for my chibi are pretty simple and only have one highlight. But since a lot of times I see VTubers have very shiny eyes with lots of sparkles, I wanted to add some more to this model. I was a bit confused on how I would do the nose. A lot of times I draw it as a slight curve in front view, but I know that when my model turns, I want the line to curve in different ways. So for this model, I drew the nose as a straight line that I will make curve depending on the view. And there was another complicated part for the nose, but we'll get to that in a moment. Also, you might be wondering if I kept the line art and coloring separate. I did while I was drawing, but when I was preparing the file for rigging, I merged a lot of my line art and color layers so that they would be one part to make the rigging process simpler. However, for some areas like the line art of the chin, I did keep it separate because I wanted to be able to make some parts of my chin line art disappear, like when my model looks up. This is something we will talk more about in future videos, but basically if I planned to edit the line art from the model, I kept it separate, and if I felt like I wouldn't need to edit the line art for that part, I would merge it. You may notice I'm drawing gray patches along the eyes. These are the eyelids, and I'll use them to cover up parts of the eyes when they close. I used gray at first so that I could see what I'm drawing, and then I changed them to the color of the skin. Oh, here's another part of the nose that was tricky. You see, I often like to draw a line that indicates the nose bridge, and I need it to turn different ways and only appear when I turn. For now, I draw two lines for the bridge, and my plan is to use layer masks in Live 2D to make them appear appropriately when I turn my head. Next was all the parts for the mouth. This is the part I was very nervous for, but it was actually not too bad. My chibi's gonna need to be able to open and close its mouth, so I need to make all the different parts for it. Basically, I had to start by drawing the upper and lower lip. Because my chibi doesn't really have lips, I make the mouth line art match exactly for the upper and lower lip. I also added extra skin color like I did for the eyelids. The skin will cover the parts inside the mouth. On layers below these lip layers, I drew the different parts of the mouth like the teeth and tongue. These are all their own parts. Some people will also include lower teeth sometimes. I didn't feel like it was needed for my model, so I didn't include them. I noticed that the skin I drew wasn't large enough to cover the mouth, so I had to draw some larger covering. Also, I merged the skin covering with the line art of the mouth, and I kind of wish I wouldn't have done that. It made the mouth rigging process a bit more challenging, so I would recommend keeping the lip line art and mouth covering separate. Also, I do want to point out that I have started rigging my model, but I'm not done rigging yet, so rigging is not something we will dive into in this video, but we will get into that in the next video of this series. I was hoping that maybe I would be able to finish rigging so that I could talk about it in this video, but I wasn't able to finish it in time. I still have a decent amount of work to do and bumps to iron out. Like I said, I'm a total noob to this process, so I'm pretty slow and learning as I go. That rhymed. Before working on my rig, I did make a test model that I used to play around with in Live 2D, and I'm really glad I did that since it helped me have something to test things out on. I probably should have spent some more time learning before jumping into making my model, but for me, a lot of times the best way I learn is just by jumping into things. I also watched a lot of tutorials. Most of the tutorials I watched were made by Chupuko, Fenrin, and Kiro Amori. I also watched a video by Kapako that was really helpful for getting a basic understanding of Live 2D and the starting process for it. Also, drawing my hair and breaking it up into pieces was definitely a challenge. I was trying my best to make sure to include some wiggle room or extra area for when the hair moves, but also making sure everything looked okay. I think it would have actually been easier if my character had more hair strands. Because the hair shape is really simple, it makes the process of making sure there won't be any hair gaps kind of tricky, because I don't have a ton to work with. Also, because some parts of the hair have to be behind the skull peeks out of some of the areas. My solution for this was to add a layer of color that covers the skull, but after working with the model a bit, I wish I would have just added some extra strands for the sides of the head. This would have made things easier when doing the head turn, but it's a little too late for me to add them now. I wanted the hair to have a gradient applied to it, so what I did is I made a gradient of light, copied it, and clipped it to each individual piece. Once again, I would have done this differently if I had known what I know now. In Live 2D, you can clip one layer to different parts, so I probably would have just done that. But this does work, and I don't mind the gradient being a part of each individual strands. It kind of breaks up the hair a bit when I move it around in Live 2D. For the shadow of each strand, I kept them separate because I knew I'd want to move them around separately to help convey the perspective of the strands. After the hair was done, I moved on to the body. In comparison, it felt much more simple than the hair. I made the neck be its own piece along with its shadow. I wanted the neck and shadow to be separate so I could make the shadow follow the head, so that the shadow looks like it's reacting to when the head moves. For the shirt collar, I broke it into two pieces. We have the front piece and the back piece. This makes it look like the collar is wrapping around the neck, but I still have extra color for if the neck or collar moves. Once again, I'm trying to avoid any empty space in the objects. For the body, I broke it up between the torso and the arms. I figured it'd be the easiest to have the arms start at the seams of the shirt. When drawing all these pieces, I make sure to draw them into the other pieces. Like I draw what's under the collar and I draw the arms into the torso a bit. That way if I move my arms, they don't have grooves cut out of them in the shape of the torso. And with that, the torso is done. And here's footage of me going layer by layer through the entire model to show you how I split it up. I do want to remind you that I am a total noob, so please don't use me as your only reference if you plan to try making your own model. There are a bunch of really helpful tutorials, and I'm just sharing my learning process with all of you. So it'd probably be better to not copy me. Oh, also, a thing I wanted to mention is that I broke up the top eyelash line into two pieces. In the past, when I tried to rig Doris's eyes for an animation, it was really tricky to make her eyes close because I draw my eyes super round, and when they close, they have to flatten out. And so I have to distort the line a lot when making it appear closed. And this distortion can look really weird and be really hard to work with. And so my idea to avoid that and make things easier is to break up the eyelash. That way it has a side lash line that I won't need to distort a lot. And I felt like this would make it so that I don't have to deform the shape of the eye as much, since I'll be working with less of a curving line. Also, a little bit of a spoiler, but it did help a lot. It helped so much. So if you draw really round eyes like me, I recommend doing this. Also, when naming my layers, I make sure to not use spaces. Apparently Live 2D doesn't like it if you use spaces or something. Oh, and I didn't know this at the time, but when Live 2D mentions left and right, it means the characters left and right. So people will sometimes name their layers in that way. However, I didn't know that at the time, so I named them with R left and right. So I'll have to keep that in mind. Anyways, we are now ready for Live 2D. Live 2D is a program that you have to pay a monthly subscription for. However, they offer a pretty long free trial, so I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm hoping I'll be able to finish my model before the trial is up. Oh, and you can use the program for free, but it's pretty limited for what you can do. So I'm going to drag in my character file. It is saved as a PSD since that is what I saw everyone else use. I chose the recommended settings for the preview resolution, and to my surprise, my model looked a bit odd when I saw it. So when you import your file, you're going to have to re-clip your clipping layers. So I had to go through and select a piece that is supposed to be clipped, and then select the piece it needs to be clipped to over here. And after doing that for all my clipping layers, my model is looking normal again. Yay! When I opened Live 2D for the first time, I was a bit confused by these two windows because I had all my parts up here as well as down here. And while to my understanding, this area is where your parts are, and they are all sorted how you have them in your art program, and they will be displayed in the order they are arranged. However, this area down here is for the deformers, and if you rearrange the parts down here, it doesn't affect how they are displayed. And this is really nice because we can then group parts together for the deformer, like all the parts for the hair, the different parts of the collar, and we can do this without affecting how they display. Oh, also deformers are things that allow you to deform the parts. We won't be covering them in this video, but we do need to do some prep to get our rig ready for them. First, I need to make art meshes for all my pieces. Meshes will make it so we can change the shape of the different parts. I'm simply selecting all my parts and click the Auto Mesh button. You can manually mesh things if you want to be more precise and clean, but from what I've heard, in many cases, the standard Auto Mesh works. And once I do that, all these little dots appear, and you might be wondering, what are all these little dots for? And well, basically, we can select them and drag them around, and it will make the shape change depending on how we drag the little dots around. The next step in the process seems to be making a texture atlas. Now, I'm going to be honest, I didn't really understand this part. I just followed the tutorial, and don't feel qualified to give any advice on this part. I'm not even totally sure I did it correctly. I recommend watching this tutorial that shows how to do it. Next up, to make the process simpler and to help us not get overwhelmed by all these parameters, we are going to sort them into different folders. This is how I categorize the folders, and this is what parameters I put into each folder. I highly recommend doing this. It made the parameters way easier for me to understand, and they felt way less overwhelming. Also, these parameters are what will help us control how the parts move and deform together, so they are very important to keep track of. Oh, I forgot, we actually will talk about deformers a little bit. I forgot that I had to go through all of my parts and then sort them into different deformers. So like I said, deformers can help us deform our different shapes. And they also kind of work like folders for grouping things together. So I select the different parts and then name the deformer, and then it kind of makes its own little deformer folder for it. And I basically just keep going through all the different parts and putting them together in different deformers. And this will be a huge part of the rigging process when I'm making everything move. We'll go over more of the specifics of the deformers and how they actually work in the next video. And now that all the prep is done, my character is ready to start making move. But that will be for another video. Sorry that I have to split this up into parts. Like I said, making a VTuber is a very long process, and I want to share it with all of you, but the only way I can do that is by splitting it up into multiple videos. Also, I will probably be covering a different topic or project in next week's video. As I mentioned, I will make a new video in the series as I make progress on the VTuber model, and I hope you continue to follow along with me on this learning journey. Before we end, I want to thank my super awesome YouTube members and Patreon patrons, including this week's new member, Linz. Thank you all so much for your support. It means so much to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!